Hi everyone, and welcome to In Deep Geek, to the third live chat that I've been doing here. Apologies for the slight delay to start with. We had a few technical difficulties at this end, but we've got it all sorted out, so we are ready and raring to go. I am really excited by my guests this week, two for the price of one. I have got Order of the Green Hand here. And we've got some really good stuff that we want to be talking through. So, guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Ellen. I'm the girl half of the Order of the Green Hand, and this is...
I'm Dave. I guess I would say
I'm
the male half of the Order of the Green Hand.
Total package here.
Yes.
We're really excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Okay, guys, so what we're going to be doing is, as the title suggests, we're going to be talking through a whole load of issues to do with the Red God, to do with Melisandre, and maybe have a little think about where this might all be going in the future. Obviously, if anything comes up on Super Chat or anything like that, then we'll come and have a look at that straight away. But if we just quickly kick off, just want to say hello to a few people that I saw there. I saw CJ. I think I saw Azora Hype was in there, which is great. Who else have we got here? We've got Scotty, Kerry, Sonia, Linus, loads of really good people. Quite a few of my patrons in there as well. So hi, everyone. We'll get to your thoughts later.
Linus is our buddy too.
Excellent.
Yeah, it looks like a couple of your buddies might also be our buddies, I think.
Wow, Azora Hype has already done a super chat. Man, you are a legend. Okay, and he has said, let's get a donation train started for these awesome content creators. I mean, I'm far too humble to say yeah, but thanks. Okay, that man is a legend, and I say this every time when he comes on. You don't see what happens behind the scenes a lot of the time with content creators, but Azora Hype Kyle is one of the most supportive people out here, so thanks, Carl. That's amazing. Should we just get straight into it, guys? We're talking about the Red God. We're talking about the Lord of Light, R'hllor. Does he exist? Go
ahead.
I would tend to say yes to a certain extent. We kind of think that the worship of the Red God is kind of like an amalgamation, or whatever you would like to call it, of people from that region that ended up worshiping Valyrian sorcery. The sorcery that the Red Priests are capable of doing seems largely rooted in fire and blood, which is Valyrian sorcery. And there's a couple other like distinct parallels that we went over in our like Birthing of the Dragons videos and stuff, where what Dany does perfectly mimics a prayer that Melisandre says, like the heat in our loins, the fire in our hearts, and something in our heads. I can't remember what it was. I was like, but that's exactly where she placed the eggs when she performed the hatching ceremony or spell or whatever it was that she did that brought the dragons to life. So,
like, I don't know how much Melisandre can do necessarily when she's using king's blood to make whatever happen. But I do think that when she looks into her flames, she can see into the future. For example, like with Renly, when she says to Stannis, I saw him defeating you in battle. What she really saw was the battle at Blackwater, when Garland Tyrell had Renly's armor on. So that's her looking into the future and then interpreting it, kind of accurately to an extent. But can you really change the fate is the question. So I do think that there is certainly power in the fire and what she sees. What necessarily she can do with her king's blood, I don't know. But she also does say that when she's closer to the wall, she doesn't have to rely so much on like her parlor tricks and the glamoring. She feels her magic is much stronger there. So, it's hard to exactly tell with the magic. It's elusive. It's something that we may not ever really understand, and George wants it that way. But that's kind of how I see the two things that Melisandre, kind of uses a lot as her powers.
I think another big one would be Thoros.
Right.
Not even really understanding what he's doing, but he's capable of bringing Beric Dondarrion back to life over and over and over again.
Okay, I mean, I think one thing I would definitely agree with what you've been saying is that there is a clear link in the type of magic that they're using between the Red Priests and sort of the old Valyrian magic. The fire and blood seems to be at the heart of everything. So I think that's really clear. I think for me, the question is whether or not there actually is a god there, or whether this is just a power that they are tapping into. Yeah. So I mean, I think I would, and I want to come on to Thoros in a moment because I've got a thought on that I just want to share with you. But what's your take on whether or not this is actually a god, or whether they've just both found a power that they can tap into?
I would tend to agree with the latter of that statement. The way that I see what's going to happen here is George said we're not going to see any gods any more than we already do. So in that sense, I think that we're already seeing, to the extent that he's going to personify a greater power through things like R'hllor as practiced, but not as a god per se. What do you think?
Yeah, like we're not going to actually see R'hllor walking around doing things, but their priests clearly have the ability to tap into something. Like Bonaro can write in flame and make flames dance out of his fingers. Melisandre shot a fireball and killed Orell's eagle at the battle at the wall.
Yep.
It was like they can do things that seem rooted like in his power, so to say, or so to speak.
Or is there just power in that kind of element?
Yeah. I mean, that's my theory, is that there is power in, as you say, in the element. There is in fire and blood. There is a type of magic that works, and we've seen that in a lot of other places. So it was when Dany was in Karth, there was a fire mage who could climb ladders made out of fire and then disappear. We've seen Dany herself brought dragons to life with effectively fire magic, fire and blood. So we see other people do similar sorts of magic. I mean, I agree with you completely. I don't think we're going to see the god wandering around. George R.R. Martin's being very clear about that. And I think that the key is actually that it doesn't matter for me. I think this is a story about the people, and the point is the fact that they believe it, not whether or not it's actually real, if that makes sense.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that that's quite accurate. And I think that, like George said, this is a fantasy novel. There's magic. So it's kind of like every once in a while you're watching this story or seeing this all unfold, and it's just kind of about the people. And then every once in a while he reminds you that this is a magical world, because he can make it what he wants, and he can kind of just, mix that into the story. And he does that masterfully, I think, because it is elusive and it's hard to understand. And another thing about like just thinking how, yes, but this is a magical world, Melisandre's shadow baby.
That's another really good point. But that doesn't seem to be necessarily connected to the Red God. That seems to be more connected to
like a shadow binding.
The time that she spent in Asshai.
True.
Yeah, that's how I interpret that as well, yeah.
Also, when you think about Melisandre and the Red Priests that we meet, is it Makaro or Bonaro that's just floating in the sea for days?
That's Makaro. Bonaro is the one that does the
I always get them mixed up. So like Makaro's just floating at sea for how long and was able to survive. And that kind of goes back into what Melisandre says. She doesn't eat. She doesn't really, drink. She drinks a little bit of water. She doesn't need to sleep that much. So she said she's sustained by the fire. And so similar to that notion, when I was reading the annotated iBook versions, there's an annotation about how Makaro survives at sea. And, it says perhaps it's the biggest red temple in Volantis that's sustaining him. So that's something that eludes our world as well. No one would survive floating at sea.
No, your body temperature would drop too much from the water around you. But
Right.
someone actually just in the chat, Carrie McDonald, just said something that I thought was kind of interesting when I was just looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Who is providing the visions in the fire then?
Oh.
That's something I hadn't thought of.
I mean, and thanks, Kerry. I mean, I think that's a really good point, and I think that for me, it's not. Why do we assume it's a person doing it? Because if these are visions, and we have like the warlocks in the House of the Undying, there are visions there as well that they have, and we don't assume that it's a person giving them these visions. We think it's some kind of magic, some connection with the shade of the evening they're drinking. There's something going on there, but we don't think that there's a god giving them those visions. And I think it's the same thing here, is that why should we assume that because somebody can see a vision in flames using their kind of magic, it is a god who has given that vision?
That's a
Right.
good point too.
Right.
I was also just thinking with like the way that they worship fire, something that you just said just like struck this in my mind. We had thought, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, we mentioned it in a video, that the worship of fire seems likely to have been something that came out of the long night when it was just completely dark, freezing cold. I was like, the only way that these people survived was fire. So developing a religion that centers around fire kind of like makes sense, because people would find themselves almost worshiping the fire that kept them, that sustained them or allowed them to live for a 30-year winter without freezing to death.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that, and the Great Other is also a memory, I think, from the long night. And they have turned this memory into a god, to have as a sort of an adversary for the god that they've created as a fire god. Can I come back to the Beric and Thoros thing you were saying just a moment ago? Because I find this fascinating, because when I was sort of trying to develop this idea of what if there isn't a red god? What if this is just a magic power? And what if everything is, all the magic in that kind of realm is based on fire and blood and sacrifice in some way? And that kind of held up pretty much across the piece until you got to that first time that Thoros brought back Beric. And then he seemed to have no faith. He seemed to not be trying to do it, so there was no intention there, and there seemed to be no particular sacrifice that he was making. So I was just wondering what your thought is on that, and how that happened and why that happened.
Well, we had, like we said earlier, the prayers of R'hllor almost seem to be specifically worded to be like the spells of fire and blood. So he said the prayer or whatever.
Yes, but just like Dany says to Mirri Maz Duur right before she walks into the funeral pyre, only death can pay for life. And death paid for the lives of her dragons. Mirri, Khal Drogo, maybe Dany, maybe the horse, maybe her unborn baby. I don't know. But Dany says that to her.
Yeah, I think there the three deaths were Khal Drogo, the unborn child, and Mirri Maz Duur herself. Right. 3 deaths creating 3 dragons.
Right.
Well, there was definitely some death the first time that he did it, because that was the ambush.
Right.
Where Ned sent them there, or whatever. They got ambushed by the mountain. I was like,
but
when
true.
the hound cut him in
that?
half or whatever and he came back, there was no death.
Well, can I run my thought past you? Just to let.
Sure.
It was just a thought I had just yesterday. Was that I was wondering whether or not the sacrifice is actually what has happened to Beric. Now on the show, you don't actually kind of see it because he's still kind of like that, running around and looking reasonably healthy and all the rest of it. But that article with George R.R. Martin in Time 6 months or a year ago, whatever it was, when he describes Beric, he says, "Poor Beric," because the blood's not running through his veins. He's losing parts of himself. He can't remember who he is, what he wants, doesn't enjoy eating anymore. And for me, that perhaps that was the unintended sacrifice that allowed that magic to happen.
Yeah, I think that could be definitely it, because at the end, he is like a distant, his old self is a distant memory. And every time he dies, he loses more of himself. And I think at the end, he didn't want to continue on like that. Really, it wasn't living to him. And that's why he decided to give the kiss of death or life, whatever, to Catelyn. And so then, you know, I'm not really sure what happens when an already revived 6-7 times person gives that kiss to another. Or is Thoros dead? I don't know. It's complicated.
It's almost as if like all of them are kind of dead in a way. Like even Dany is almost like we talked about it. I was like, when Dany, right before she births the dragons, she goes in the bath, takes a bath, and she floated like a dead person.
Right.
Like she compared it's like the same exact words that she said when Khal Drogo was floating in the thing when Mirri Maz Duur was going to do her blood spell with him. And it's like, is Dany, like, did Dany like almost die or die? She was just like,
well, because in the app, and I just recalled this, in the app it says that Dany's child, unborn child, paid for Khal Drogo's life the first time. You know how he's still alive, but he's just a shell of what he once was. He's comatose, but he's living, right? He's breathing, sort of, but he's not himself. So then when you think about that, if the baby paid for that, that's it. That's wiped out. The baby can't then now be the payment for the dragon. So was it Dany? 3 people were in that pyre. 3 dragons came out. It's just so hard to figure out. And when Dany's in Marine, she doesn't get the pale mare. Like, people are dropping like flies now. Is that just Valyrian blood and they just don't catch things like that because they're gods or whatever? Maybe, but they used to get grayscale, so they don't seem to be completely immune to common illnesses. So
yeah, I mean, I think this is for me, it's a fascinating thing that are there some people who are dead. I just want to get onto in a second because there's just a quick clarification question that's come up in the chat. It was Linus saying, question, if the Battle of the Dawn was in Westeros, why don't Westerosis seem keen to worship fire in particular? Which I think is a really good question. Why is that a thing which developed in Essos rather than in Westeros? I mean, I think my answer to that is that this is a matter of which myths and memories have survived, and so the people in Westeros who have survived since then are the First Men and the North, and they have got the memory of the last hero going out to get the Children of the Forest. So for them, that was their way in. The legend of their way into to winning, to surviving, to seeing the dawn, whereas an alternative legend came up in Essos. So that's my take. I don't know whether you guys have got any particular thoughts on that one.
I was kind of thinking, I was like, as strange as this sounds, I was like, the worship of R'hllor and the worship that the First Men originally did when they got to Westeros are actually not that different. They're both inclined to like light and life. The First Men, after the Pact, they started worshiping in front of the weirwood trees, but originally they worshipped things like, we'll say like Garth Greenhand, for instance. He was like a fertility god. And that's obviously the worship of life in whatever. I was like, and the red priests in the red religion seems absolutely hell-bent on making sure that a long night doesn't happen again. I was like, because that would kill everything. So it's like, there is like an obscure connection between the two. And I just feel like a lot of the stuff is connected but not, and because the fire and blood magic that seems to be central in the worship of R'hllor is an Eastern thing. It's a little different than just like the blood magic that seems to be more of a Western thing. So the First Men remember more the Children of the Forest and the blood magic that they likely learned from them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the other side, they do the fire and blood magic. And that's how R'hllor kind of took off over there.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think there's that certainly does make a lot of sense, and I think that kind of ties in with what I was saying. I think just to sort of draw that bit together, because we started out by asking whether or not the Red God was real, and just to sort of to tie that bit off, I think we sort of agreed that we're not going to see the Red God wandering around. Whether or not it is an actual literal god thing actually isn't the main point. The main point is that there are people who believe it and worship it, and there is clearly a power there which both the Red Priests and people who use some sort of old Valyrian magic can tap into. Would you agree with that as sort of a summing up of that bit?
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
In that case, I think what I wanted to do was just come on to what you were saying a little bit earlier, Mary Ellen, about are there some people who are dead? And you were wondering whether or not Dany might be dead. Now, I did a video a couple of months ago where I speculated that Melisandre is a fire wight. Now, the reason why was that particularly when you look at her POV chapter, because we only have the one from her, and you find out these things that she doesn't really sleep all that much, she doesn't eat all that much. We know that she's very old. We know that she doesn't feel the cold all that much. And when you start adding all these things together, and she says, the Red God, the fire, is what keeps me going. To me, that sounds suspiciously like what we hear about Beric. So I wonder whether or not she is actually a fire wight, and there might be a whole lot more of them than we're aware of. So what's your take on that?
Yeah.
It seems to me like almost all of the Red Priests, or the powerful ones, could be. Like she was talking about before with Makaro, he didn't die. He floated there without getting to eat anything, drink anything, nothing, for weeks, maybe even months, just waiting to be picked up by Victarion's ship.
Right.
Like he just jumped off and hung out there. And it seems like there was a quote from George about somebody being sustained by the fires of
Volantis,
of the Red Temple in Volantis.
Yeah, I mentioned it a few minutes ago.
All right.
Yeah, so go ahead. And how the fire sustains them, like whereas Melisandre, do we think she's tied to the temple?
She could be. She seems a little bit independent, if you will, of the rest of them, or certainly is taking a more active role than the other ones are. I mean, she's like really getting involved. She's searching for the next Azor Ahai. She's trying everything that she can, where the other ones seem like they just want to help Dany.
Right.
I was like, the Red Priests are preaching in the streets of Volantis that we need to help Dany. And they were talking against the Triarchs entering the war in Slaver's Bay against Dany, and they were trying to rally the common people and the slaves against the Triarchy.
Yeah,
to try to put a stop to it.
I mean, I view Melisandre effectively as being like this heretic. She's headed out. She's headed out. She wasn't sent there. She went of her own volition. And once she gets there, she decides somebody is Azor Ahai reborn, which it later turns out is then against what the general teaching of the rest of the church is going to be. They all say this is going to be Daenerys. and she never seems to take any instructions from them. We never like see her like getting a note from the Temple of Volantis saying, right now you should be doing this or that, or you should be teaching the other. It's all about her and what she thinks and what she's seen. It's almost incidental, as far as I can see, the fact that she is a Red Priest. This is just another set of skills that she's learned. So I mean, that's very much where I see her. So if she does return back there in the books, as she appears she may be doing on the show, then I think that'll be a really interesting reunion, because it's be her having completely broken away and now coming back and saying, "Oh yeah, hi. So can I join the team again?"
Yes, and George, when he was asked about Melisandre, he specifically said, to clarify, she was not sent on this mission by the Red Temple or the, in Volantis, and she has her own agenda. So, and then you're like, well, her own agenda, it seems like the agenda is the same, but her methods are more, like you said, she's kind of going on her own. And back to your other idea about her being dead, when Crescent tries to poison her, nothing happens to her. So, like, what is dead may never die, I guess. Because I don't know how she could have, maybe she could have taken an antidote before because she saw it in her flames or something, but I lend more towards, with the other data points you said, like she doesn't eat, doesn't really drink and all that. It kind of ties more into the fact that she's dead and a revived soldier for R'hllor in a way. But
absolutely, yeah. So sort of building on that, do you think that is why, and this is another really interesting thing that George R.R. Martin said about Melisandre, he said, when asked who is the most misunderstood character in A Song of Ice and Fire, he said Melisandre. Do you think that might be the reason, or is there a level that we just don't understand her character and what she's trying to do? What do you think he might have meant by that?
Go ahead. No, I just had a question as to, what do you think most people understand about her? That would be like my first part of the question. What do most people think about Melisandre?
I think most people, this is where I was going to go with it. I think most people see her as evil because of she sacrifices people to the fire, which is obviously, like, especially like in our current world, that's like barbaric as all hell. I was like, but she's like, so I feel like people think that she's a bad person because she's doing it. Whereas I kind of see her more of like a blood raven type character that will do whatever she has to do. Doesn't care about the morality of it, doesn't care at all about any of that stuff. She just wants to get the job done. It doesn't care at all how many people she has to sacrifice to do it. She's going to stop the long night.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's right. I think she thinks that she's in the right, and she is actually, and the way I think that she's misunderstood, as well as the fact that I think she's a fire wight, I think that she thinks that she has to do some things in order to achieve a greater good. She doesn't see herself as being a bad person. There are even, again, in that POV chapter, there are even a couple of bits where it turns out she's actually doing something quite nice, where there was one of Davos's sons who could have been sent off, and she asked for him to be kept back with her because she thought that Davos had suffered enough.
Yes.
And that for me is quite telling, because, Davos wasn't the best friend of Melisandre by any stretch of the imagination, but there was some compassion going on there. So I think, those are a lot of things that she is misunderstood about. Can I just pause for one moment, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and I just wanted to do a couple of quick things for let my patrons know a couple of things that are going on right now. So first of all, for patrons, thank you. I honestly cannot do this without your support. It means a huge amount to me. The next one of my narrations from the Winds of Winter pre-release chapters is going to be Victarion. That's going to be coming out next week, so keep an eye out for that. And also I've added in an extra benefit for $10 subscribers, where you get to help choose what videos I do in the future. So if you're interested in that at all, do check that out, patreon.com/indiegeek. And I just also wanted to run something past anyone who watches my videos, because I know there's a lot of Westworld fans out there. And as I'm sure you know, I'm doing weekly Westworld content leading up to season 2. I was wondering, is there any interest in me doing a live stream focused purely on Westworld at some point in the next couple of weeks? We've got the trailer we can start talking about. We've got lots of theories we can go about season 2. Let me know if you think that would be a really good thing to do. Let me know in the comments below, or if you're watching live in the chat. So that's it from my sort of announcements. Guys, actually, is there anything you want to sort of say about stuff you've got coming on that you want to tell people about?
Well, our Doran Martell video will be out tomorrow.
It just keeps getting longer and longer.
Yes.
It was originally like 14 minutes, 17 minutes, somewhere in that range, and it just grew exponentially last night. And
yeah. So that's coming out tomorrow. And then next week, we will be coming out with maybe a short little video on why. You want to tell them?
Yeah. We've been fed up with this
I got
one
fired
for like
up
a
about
really
it last
long
night.
time. We are going to do a why Lyanna sucks video. 'Cause we did our why Catelyn sucks, and everybody like glorifies Lyanna like she was like some awesome character. And I was like, we are going to do a really quick why Lyanna sucks video.
Yeah.
Wow, I have to watch that.
Yeah. We got to make it fun sometimes, you know.
Save the fire for the video, but I'm intrigued. I have to say, that sounds great.
Oh yes, definitely. But yeah, so that's really all we got going on.
Excellent. Well, it's good stuff. And guys, I should have said at the beginning, but I've watched quite a few of Order of the Green Hands videos, and they are really good. If you like sort of intelligent analysis, actually getting into it, they're focused a lot more on the books than the show, and so there's an awful lot of looking at things from slightly different angles. So there's a lot of stuff there about different ideas about what might have happened on the Tower of Joy, the role of House Dane, things like that. That if you just want a different perspective that's really well researched, really well thought out, really well presented, do check out their channel. I will put a link to that in the description after this is finished.
Thank you.
No, and thank you for coming on. It's an absolute pleasure. Shall we just have a quick look in the comments, see what's going on? Questions come up. Do you think Mother Royne is going to be important like the Great Other and R'hllor?
Ooh.
I'll tell you what.
We'll have to refrain.
You're going to get an answer to that in the next week or so in our Doran
as
series.
we continue our Doran series.
Well, there you have it, guys. You just tune in for that one and you find out the answer. For me, I think the answer is no, but I'll defer to the experts on this after that one. What else have we got going on? Got a lot of love going on for Westworld. Excellent, guys. Love it. I saw a really funny comment.
This person goes, why Lyanna sucks. Subscribe. I liked that. That was really funny.
Who did say that? Two pieces, one puzzle.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That made me laugh.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Westworld season 2 date is April the 22nd for whoever it was who asked that. What else have we got going on here? I'm sure I saw another question. Could Melisandre be trying to free herself or part of a rebellion from the church since she and the rest of her order are slaves? That's a really good question. I mean, I think this is a sort of a tension that there definitely is in between the worship of the Red God and Daenerys, in that in Volantis, they're pretty much all slaves. They've got the tattoos, the slaves' tattoos on them. Whereas Daenerys obviously is very much against slavery. So there's quite a tension there. Do I think Melisandre is on some mission to do that? No, I think she's just focused on the things she says she's focused on. I think she's focused on Azor Ahai. I keep on nearly saying Azor Hype. Kyle, if you're still in the chat, that's a good thing for you. But guys, what do you think? Do you see anything going on there? What about the tension between the worship of the Red God and slavery and Daenerys?
I do think that Melisandre longs to be released from that. like, I think that, like, the Melanie Lot 7, I see that as, like, so when you become a thrall or a slave to the Red God, you're assigned a lot. And, you know, we learned about that when we were going into our, when we were doing the Lies of the Andals, Lies of the Seven series. And there's gods that are like, their job is to assign you a lot, assign you a fate, assign you a destiny. And so when I think about when she thinks when this is over and we defeat the Great Other, Melanie Lot 7 will be a memory. It won't be something she has to fulfill anymore. So I feel like she is totally focused on saving the world. I don't think she has an ulterior motive or anything like that. I think you said it exactly right. She's trying to do what she says she's trying to do. When Maester Aemon thinks back about the sword that Stannis grits his teeth and carries around because he can't stand all the mummer show of the whole thing, he says she has to know it's light with no heat, an empty glamour. So he doesn't see her as bad. He wants her to realize she might have the wrong guy. And Maester Aemon, although blind, has a way of seeing who people really are. And so in a way, I think that she is sort of tragic almost. I
think that it's a really interesting dynamic with the Red God Temple supporting Dany. Like, they're all in on Dany.
Right.
All of their priests are preaching, everybody help Dany defeat the Great Other. But she's abolishing slavery, and a religion that embraces slavery is supporting her. It's a very interesting dynamic that I would like to see. Like, I don't know how that's going to eventually turn out. I was like, would Dany even accept the endorsement of slavers?
Personally, I don't think she would, but I think that the way that this is going, the kind of the feel you get when Tyrion is passing through Volantis and he sort of goes there and he sees Benaro and the crowds amassing, and he thinks that the atmosphere is like he remembered being in King's Landing just before there was a riot. And I think the kind of the feeling I get is that there's, although yes, they are slaves, I think that they're not going to end up condoning slavery. I think that they're going to lead a sort of a slaves revolt, as it were, with Daenerys across that whole area. I think that is what their game plan is. And it's very much a kind of a grassroots movement that they're trying to do. It's not the powerful people; it's the slaves.
Actually, something that you just said just struck a thought in my mind about Tyrion comparing the two.
Yes,
and it's both times the dominant religion of the area riling up the small folk, if you will, against the leadership.
Yes.
And like bringing it to a boiling point. I was like, it boiled over in the case of King's Landing when they, right after, was it right after, what's her name left? Myrcella.
Yes.
I was like,
when
right
they
after
put her on the boat.
Yeah, right after they put Myrcella on the boat, it boiled over in King's Landing. Tyrion wasn't there for it to, when it boiled over, but it looked like to him it was about to boil over. And like
it just was eerily reminded him of like the atmosphere that he felt that day in King's Landing, similar to that in Volantis, and things are definitely heating up there. And I think that the Red Priests are on a mission to counter whatever this ice cold, front darkness that's coming. And I read somewhere, it's either in the app or I can't remember exactly, or it's in an annotation, but Thoros was sent to Westeros to start converting people to R'hllor. And so they were almost trying to, kind of think about that ahead of time. And that's what he was sent there to do. And, he kind of, Ned liked him. Seemed to.
Robert liked him. He seemed like he was a good guy. He just likes...
He drank and stuff, but he's the perfect George character. He's gray. He's not perfect. He's not a pious priest. He gets hammered. He likes to just indulge his urges. But at the end of the day, he's good. You know what I mean? Like he's trying to fight on the side of light, and humans and people, and
Life.
you need life. You need light. So
I think certainly with Thoros, it was quite an opportunistic move by the sort of the powers that be in the church, who sent him over, because they didn't actually send him just to Robert. They sent him over earlier to Aerys II, and they were seeing that, and they see the Targaryens obviously always liked a bit of fire and dragon stuff, but this was somebody who was obsessed with fire, and so they saw the opportunity to go in there and actually try and preach the religion of fire. So it was when he went and Robert Baratheon came in that basically Thoros started losing his faith, I think.
Yeah, I think that he didn't maybe necessarily lose his faith. He didn't think he had much power.
I don't even think he had faith when he got there. I think that he just was like, I'll go do something else.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, we I want to get on to the last sort of question here, although we've just got something's just flashed up there, which is fascinating. George R.R. Martin has a Melisandre figure painted like an ice wight. What do we make of that? I did not know that.
Ooh, can they send us a picture?
Yeah, I'd love to see a picture. That sounds fascinating. I don't know. Maybe he's trying to tell us something for the future. There's I was looking at the Forsaken visions quite recently, actually. When you get Euron there with his bride, who's got I think it was blue fire, and I haven't really come into an idea in my mind about who that is, but obviously the thought immediately comes, could that be Melisandre? Could it be Daenerys? Probably Cersei, as that seemed to be the way the show was going. But it's I think certainly some things that have been associated with fire will at some point be associated with ice, I think, which is again on the show we saw with the dragon. So I think that might be what it is, an emerging of the fire and ice, because this is a story of fire and ice. Guys, do you want to add anything on that?
The way that I see the Song of Ice and Fire is throughout the novels, George kind of paints like these battles as a dance, you know, when the dragons danced, when they're sword fighting, you know, they were
the Song of Steel.
The Song of Steel on steel. It's like it's almost an art. It's a great way to paint it as an author for the person. It's this engaging of opposing forces, engagement of opposing forces. So the way that I see a Song of Ice and Fire is the perpetual battle between these two opposing elements that actually really can't exist without the other. And so you're always seeking to get the balance. And, you know, the seasons have been out of whack for a long time now in this world. He says there's a magical reason for that. And so things have been kind of off balance for a while. So perhaps the Song of Ice and Fire will be the battle to bring it back to sort of a more balanced, you know, even playing field between the two forces. You know, and then when you think about like, so fire, he said, fire is life, fire is light, fire is passion. And ice is kind of everything that's not. So that's the way that I see what a Song of Ice and Fire is. And he said that the title has many meanings. So it's probably a combination of a lot of the different ideas that we kind of have talked about so far.
I feel like everyone trying to make it a person has very oversimplified.
Yeah. I think that's right. Sorry, did you have more on that one?
Oh, no.
Okay. So I mean, I think that's right. I think there are many meanings to a Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, for me, I think you're really right. This is about ice and fire as two opposing forces. He talks a lot about Robert Frost's poem, and that is very clear. There's ice and there's fire, and both of them could destroy the world, and they're both very, very dangerous. And the deeper into this we get, the more I see this is very much a story where this isn't a story of the good guys versus the bad guys, or the alive people versus the dead people or any of these other things. This is a story of fire and ice as two conflicting forces that could destroy the world, and humanity, the little people, stuck in the middle. And how do you actually stop these two forces from destroying the world? And this, I think, is where the fire wight thing for me is fascinating, because if you start buying into the idea that you get we had one definite fire wight already. John perhaps is going to come back as some sort of fire wight. I was speculating Melisandre might be a fire wight. If there's a power there now to make people fire wights, might we end up seeing not just a battle between the army of the dead and the army of the living, but the army of the ice dead and the army of the fire dead?
Yeah.
So actually we've got two dead armies, and we're not rooting for either side here. What we're really rooting for are the people in the middle who are just getting trampled over by all of this.
Right.
It does seem to me that at some point, though, like, you have to lean towards the fire side, because at least, like, we'll say that, like, fire wins or whatever. Like, a never-ending summer people could live through. A never-ending dark winter would kill everybody. Can't grow food. Everyone's freezing to death. I was like, they would run out of everything soon.
Yeah, but it couldn't just be summer every day.
No, summer every day.
No,
I mean, there are places. I mean, if you go to Hawaii.
Yeah, but there's other
every
places
day.
in the world where it's not. The whole world cannot be in perpetual summer.
I think there has to be the balance. I think
that's the balance.
That's where we have to get to. What I can't see the story ending with either ice having won or fire.
No, it won't be.
They have to have some sort of balance going back. So we can't. I don't think we're going to end up with dragons ruling the world,
right?
Any more than we're going to end up with others or White Walkers ruling the world. They're both going to be sort of penned back in some way so that humanity can move on a little bit. That doesn't mean it's going to end up. The whole thing will probably happen again, but there has to be a balance.
And one of the things you just said to me, I just thought about something. So, like with the ice wights, they are those that are raised again are raised by other wights, right?
No, they're raised by others.
Others.
Yeah.
And the others, I mean, yes, they're supernatural, but they're not like living per se, are they?
They certainly appear to be living.
Well, I'm just wondering now if a fire wight can only be made by maybe something that died. I don't know.
Well, my theory is that the fire wights can be made by the red priests in the same way that the ice wights are made by the White Walkers, the others, and there's a sort of a balance going on there. That's the way I see it.
So they could just be a red priest that's living, by our definition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because there's also an enormous difference between a wight and like Beric Dondarrion. I was like, Beric Dondarrion still talks, thinks,
true,
remembers who people are. I was like, there does seem to be some sort of memory involved. Like, I believe Osha said that her husband walked in to her house. That might have only been in the show, but regardless, and his eyes were all blue, but like he knew where he lived. He walked home. Uthor,
but that's
Othar,
still not to the level of
like Beric Dondarrion. It's way different still.
Yes.
The wights are just like determined to kill. I was like, whereas Beric Dondarrion is still largely the same guy he was before.
Right.
Well, I don't know whether I would say he's the same guy as before.
No. Yeah, right.
I think he's very different, and I think he's lost a lot of the memories of who he was. I wonder whether there's an issue of how long it is between the death and the sort of the resurrection that shows how different you're. So with Lady Stoneheart, for example, she had, 6 days or something? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And as a result, she was very different when she came back, and had lost a huge amount of what we might think of the humanity or whatever. But we don't actually see so much in the books the process of raising ice wights. And you're right that they seem to still have some memories. That I was thinking of the one that they brought back right at the very beginning when they sort of bring back into Castle Black, and then hunts down, tries to find Mormont. That has to be from a memory, knowing where to go. So I think that there are similarities there, and I think that they're deliberate similarities. And I don't think we know enough yet about how it works to be able to say whether one is better than another one.
Right. I agree.
That's fair enough.
One of the things somebody was asking about in the chat was like where you think Melisandre came from. You know, the story goes Stannis went to a shy. I laugh every time I hear that story because I just can't see him doing that. But what do you think about that? Where
Melisandre came from?
Like, so the story goes that Stannis went to a shy to get her.
No.
There's 0% chance that Stannis went there to go.
I mean, I think that there's enough evidence to suggest that she headed over of her own volition, and then she started work on Selyse and tried to then work her way up to Stannis. He did not proactively go out to get her. If you read the first few chapters of A Clash of Kings, he's not this great zealot. Then he's not. It's just yes, of course, she seems very useful, and my wife seems to like her. And hey, if she thinks that I'm some great promised prince and can give me power, then good. So he was not going somewhere to seek her out. She came to find him.
Yeah, and I think that she just, you know, the way that we think Melisandre came into Stannis's, you know, to Dragonstone and everything like that would be through like an unlikely ally situation with other characters. And we have a whole video series on it. It's kind of complicated to explain right here, but bottom line is that I don't think that he went to get her. I agree with you. She probably went to Westeros of her own accord because, you know, according to the Valyrians of old, the doom of man was going to come out of Westeros. So a person trying to save the world, possibly, you know, understanding and knowing a lot about Valyrian history, would want to go back there and try to save the world. And what she thinks to herself at one point, she's like, I'm at Dragonstone. So this must be him, you know? And so she's almost short-sighted in a way, but, you know, like, remember we talked about that one time about how she went to Dragonstone and was just kind of assuming it was Stannis. I don't think Stannis ever believed he was Azor Ahai. Like, I just think he was, like you said, kind of going along with it. He's looking for any ally to overcome whatever this is, the situation in King's Landing and Beyond the Wall.
I just feel like Stannis's tell is he grinds his teeth. When Stannis grinds his teeth is when he's playing the Game of Thrones, or he's lying, or he's doing something that is not natural for Stannis. He grinds his teeth whenever he has to do that. Whenever they're talking about him being Azor Ahai, he grinds his teeth. He hates it. When he has to play political games, he grinds his teeth. He hates it. I was like that. As he puts that in there with Stannis grinding his teeth over and over and over again, and eventually you figure out like that's when he does it. He grinds his teeth when she's
like, pull the sword out and show these people now, and he's like, yeah, okay. Is this over now? All right, good.
You can hear him in King's Landing grinding his teeth from Dragonstone.
I mean, that's
such a serious, hard, you know, Stannis is like hard evidence, you know, like I just can't see him being like,
no,
I'm the promised one.
Okay, guys. We're starting to come towards the end of the hour now. So, so it's just, are there any others kind of burning? I was hoping maybe we could get onto to Azor Ahai, but I think that's probably going to be too big a conversation for the last couple of minutes. But is there anything else you were wanting to sort of pick up on?
With the Red Priests,
something that you mentioned earlier, and you know we've pondered the idea, like, who is Melisandre? Is she somebody from history? Is she Shiara Seastar? Is she Shiara Seastar's mother? You know, who is she? And I don't know. I don't know if there's enough information to kind of like nail that down. But I do think there's a connection to Bloodraven. And I know that when she sees him and Bran beyond the wall, she doesn't recognize him. But we all have to remember he looks pretty scary at this point in the story. He's
Half
got
of his
trees
face is
growing
missing.
out of his
He's got leaves
Poor
growing out of his
Bloodraven.
head and mushrooms on his forehead.
So the way she remembers him would not be the way that he looks now.
It also seems like that wasn't like a literal vision where she was looking right at the person. Like he was a tree man and Bran was a wolf.
Right.
So it was like
a primitive version of it or
like
something.
A symbolic representation almost.
Yes.
I was like, we think that Melisandre is Shi'ar Star.
Like we've considered that, yeah.
I was like, we've said it.
That would be like almost like her long lost love with with Bloodraven. And was she beyond the wall when she was looking for him because he went missing beyond the wall? And then she stumbled on Stannis, and she's the one that gave him the scarlet, or not Stannis, Mance Rayder. And she's the one that gave him the scarlet silk and sewed up his wounds and everything like that. So we ponder all of that in our Wars to Come series. So if anybody hasn't seen those, it's we outline all of that. But Bloodraven is definitely one of those characters that is like a necessary evil. He's definitely vilified. He was fine with being vilified as long as he was kind of fulfilling this other mission for the greater good. And I see Mel's very similar to that.
It's like they're doing their duty and they don't care what people think about them after, as long as they get it done.
The common theme in the story is, and Maester Aemon, says it to Jon, and it just reoccurs. What's a man honor when the realm is at stake? That
was Corrin.
What will you choose? But Maester Aemon talks about it with Jon too, and it's just maybe not in those words, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of these guys that are choosing to forsake their honor for the greater good, even Jaime does it. I think that's something
a lot of characters do. I mean, Ned, I think, is the perfect example of this. I mean, I know that gets into a lot of your other theories, but in terms of like the he doesn't care what people think about him. He's going to do what the right thing is. I mean, in terms of where I think Melisandre comes from, do I think she's just Sea Star? I'm not convinced. I can certainly see it. I've not seen any sort of complete nailed down evidence that convinces me completely, I have to say. I agree there's a lot of similarities there with the sort of the way that she's being the sort of the high priest, as far as we're concerned, that we see doing all of these kinds of things, and we've got Bloodraven on the other side with the different kind of magic, so there's a kind of an equality there. I think in her POV chapter there's a memory of being a slave, the slave Mel, and it's not 100% clear, but I think the implication is that was her. And so I think that if as sold into slavery at a young age to the temple, and I think that that seems the most likely route to me, rather than she's some big and impressive person from Westeros who's gone over to Essos for to have. I think it makes more sense for me that she actually did start in, say, Ashai and worked her way up. But I don't know. I'm willing to be convinced.
It kind of stemmed from the exact same physical description: the heart-shaped face, extremely narrow waist,
right?
Very full-breasted. I was like, they gave like the exact, like almost identical description, except with red hair and red eyes instead of blonde hair and red and blue eyes.
Right.
I was like, that's where it kind of like stemmed from. And then the more we looked at her, the more we were like, she seems like the type of girl that Bloodraven would like.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I can see
she's been practicing her magic for years beyond count. And when she was
she said she was a sorceress before she went
and when
Ashai.
And when she kind of we're assuming that when Melanie Lot 7 was said to her, or we're thinking when she was sold into slavery, she was a child or something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true.
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be her either. It wasn't a completely clear vision.
Right, because it could have been
like
almost a memory
or
too, or something. It's God, it's perplexing.
But whatever it was something which was incredibly personal to her to still remember it all that time later. So I mean, I think on the appearance thing, I certainly get it, but I mean, I think George plays with appearance quite a lot, sort of using the same kind of descriptors for different people in a way that makes us immediately see links. And sometimes I think that's deliberate with say the alchemist down in Old Town. I think we were supposed to see the description was exactly the same as what Jaqen's changed appearance was, but sometimes I did wonder whether he's just playing with us and sort of saying that, you know, with Tyrion's eyes, it's just oh, is it a hint of something going on there or not? I don't know. Okay,
yes,
guys.
and, yes, no, I know what you're saying. I do. In the for the prologue one with the tight black curls, is that what you were talking about? The alchemist?
Yes, absolutely.
It's exactly
there's an annotation on that. I love these annotated iBooks, but there's an annotation on that draws the reader to this is the exact description of Arya gives you of Jaqen. Now you could say, oh wow, he's really messing with us now because he adds that little annotation on there, but I would tend to say maybe not. Like, no, it's like a scavenger hunt.
It's obviously Jaqen. I mean, there's zero doubt because he killed Pate, and then Pate was there when Sam got there. So it was
right.
There's zero doubt that it was really him.
Right.
Hey, Jim Young, how you doing? Sorry, Jim's one.
But I know what you're saying, though, Robert, about just like how is he messing with us? I feel like that every day. I'm like, wait, no.
Like, why is he doing?
Why do you do that? You know, so I totally get it. So I'm like, am I seeing things? And then, but it's so funny because I think he is so detailed down to things that like you never really know where there's the clue. And I was looking up a random thing yesterday that I was like, wow, that just led me here. So pine cones.
Medieval uses for pine cones.
Pine cones.
It was like, because there was like a huge pine cone trade, and we're like, what the hell do you do with pine cones? And we're like, next thing we know, we're.
But yes, I totally know what you're saying about him just messing with us.
Excellent. Okay, guys, I'm really sorry. I'm gonna wrap it up there. I think because we've gone over the hour that I wanted to do. Is there anyone else you wanted to do a shout out to before we go?
No.
Thank you for coming, everybody that we're friends with. Jim Young, 10.
Yep. Andrew
Williams.
Linus. Yeah, 10's in there. Who else did I see?
There's got to be more that I'm not thinking. Scotty.
Yep.
Cafe Stark.
Yep.
Thank you to everybody else that we didn't say. I know, I'm just scrolling through the chat real quick and looking at all the names, trying to read them real quick. But thank you, everyone, for coming by, and thank you, Robert, for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Absolutely, not a problem at all. Do you want to just remind people where to find you on the internet if they don't know you?
Yeah.
We have a Twitter, a Facebook, and our channel is called The Order of the Green Hand.
We have a Patreon. I wish I could cite it as good as Robert did with his www. No, I don't know. Patreon. Just Google Order of the Green Hand, 2 words. And you'll find us online.
We do in-depth
theories
and analysis and some very, very, very sarcastic reviews of the show.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
An absolute pleasure, guys. And I meant it earlier. They do really good videos. I would highly recommend you head over to their channel, have a look at a few things, and subscribe. But that's it for today. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone in the chat. It's been really interesting just reading through. There's been some great questions coming through. Thanks to Kyle Azora Hype for the super chat, and thanks everyone for the steer on Westworld. There'll definitely be a Westworld live stream coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks again to Order of the Green Hand for coming on, and guys, I will see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.